The bank manager's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. His face had gone completely white, like someone had drained all the blood straight out through his shoes. He was staring at my grandmother's care account transfer form, the same form I'd signed 3 weeks ago in my parents' kitchen, while they stood over me, explaining how this was the responsible thing to do, how Grandma would want the money managed properly, how I was being selfish by questioning them. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't leave this building. Don't call anyone." He pressed a button under his desk. "I'm locking the branch doors right now, and I've just filed a suspicious activity report with federal authorities." I felt my stomach drop through the floor. Suspicious activity report. Those 3 words meant something had gone very, very wrong with that transfer. The transfer my parents had insisted was routine, necessary, completely legal. The manager looked at me with something between pity and horror. "How much do you know about what your parents did with your grandmother's money after you signed those forms?" I didn't know anything. That was the problem. But I was about to find out why, 3 weeks ago, I'd helped my parents steal $890,000 from an old woman who couldn't defend herself. And why today, sitting in this bank manager's office, I was being given a chance I didn't deserve. A chance to fix everything before it was too late. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Amelia Chen. I'm 28 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I was doing the right thing. I work as a software developer at a tech startup in Seattle. The pay is decent, $92,000 a year, enough to cover my rent on a studio apartment in Capitol Hill, and occasionally splurge on good coffee. I'm the kind of person who follows rules, trusts authority, believes that family means something. That last part was my biggest mistake. My grandmother, Lin Chen, is 84 years old. She raised me after my mother went through what we politely called her difficult years. Grandma taught me Mandarin, made me practice piano until my fingers ached, and told me stories about growing up in Taiwan that made me feel connected to something bigger than myself. She worked as a seamstress for 40 years, saving every penny she could. By the time she retired, she'd accumulated nearly $900,000 through careful investing and a lifetime of sacrifices I couldn't begin to understand. 2 years ago, Grandma had a stroke. Not severe, but enough to slow her down, make her confused sometimes, require care she couldn't provide herself. My parents, Robert and Susan Chen, immediately stepped up. They moved her into an assisted living facility, took control of her finances through a power of attorney, and assured everyone they were handling everything perfectly. I believed them. Why wouldn't I? They were my parents. 3 weeks ago, they called me to their house for what they described as an urgent family meeting. I drove to their place in Bellevue, a nice house in a good neighbourhood, the kind of home that suggested financial comfort but not extravagance. My father opened the door before I could knock, his expression serious. "Amelia, thank you for coming. This is important." They sat me down at the kitchen table. My mother made tea, the expensive oolong Grandma used to serve on special occasions, which should have been my first warning sign. My parents never used the good tea unless they wanted something. "We need your help with Grandma's care accounts," my father said, sliding a folder across the table. "The assisted living facility is increasing their fees significantly. We need to consolidate her accounts to manage everything more efficiently." I opened the folder. Inside were transfer authorization forms, all requiring my signature as a secondary account holder. Grandma had added me to her accounts years ago, back when she was still sharp, saying she trusted me to look out for her interests if she ever couldn't. "Why do you need my signature?" I asked. "Don't you have power of attorney?" My mother's smile was patient, practiced. "We do, sweetheart, but because you're also on the accounts. The bank requires dual authorization for transfers over certain amounts. It's just a formality, nothing to worry about." That explanation made sense. At least, it made enough sense that I didn't push further. My mother continued, explaining how the new consolidated account would make it easier to pay for Grandma's care, how the fees were getting so expensive, how they were working so hard to make sure she had everything she needed. "She's your grandmother," my father added. "You want what's best for her, don't you?" "Of course," I said, and I signed. All 6 forms. Transferring every account Grandma had into a new consolidated care fund that my parents controlled. I signed because I trusted them. I signed because I was busy with work and didn't have time to dig into the details. I signed because the alternative was believing my own parents were capable of something terrible, and that thought was too ugly to entertain. I signed and I didn't ask enough questions. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, I walked into First Regional Bank for what I thought would be a routine verification appointment. The bank had sent me a letter requesting I come in to confirm the transfers I'd authorised. Standard procedure, the letter said. Just a formality. The young teller who greeted me was pleasant and professional. She took my ID, pulled up my information, and then her expression changed, just slightly. Just enough that I noticed. She excused herself, made a phone call in the back, spoke in hushed tones I couldn't hear. Then Theodore Whitmore appeared. Regional manager, expensive suit, the kind of face that had seen things that made him stop being surprised by human awfulness. He asked me to come to his private office, and that's when everything started to unravel. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single comment, and your support means the world to me. Now, back to what happened next. Whitmore closed his office door and sat down heavily in his leather chair. He pulled up something on his computer, studied it for a long moment, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Miss Chen, I need to ask you some questions about the transfers you authorised 3 weeks ago, and I need you to be completely honest with me, because what happens next depends on your answers. My throat went dry. What's wrong? Is there a problem with the paperwork? The paperwork is perfect, he said. Too perfect, actually. That's part of the problem. He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen was a detailed record of Grandma's accounts, the balances before the transfer, the new consolidated account, and something else, something that made my stomach clench. These 6 accounts totaled $892,000. You signed forms authorising the transfer of all of it into a new joint account controlled by your parents. That part is documented and legal, assuming you understood what you were signing. He paused. Did you understand what you were signing? I thought I was consolidating Grandma's care funds, making it easier to pay for her assisted living. Did you know that 2 days after the transfer was complete, your parents withdrew $850,000 in cash? The room tilted. I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. That's impossible, I whispered. They wouldn't. They said it was for her care. Whitmore's expression was grim. Miss Chen, I need you to understand something. This bank has very sophisticated fraud detection systems. When someone withdraws that much cash in a short time frame, especially from an elderly person's account, it triggers automatic reviews. When we dug deeper, we found several concerning patterns. He pulled up more screens. Transfer records. Withdrawal patterns. Dates and amounts that painted a picture I didn't want to see. Your grandmother's accounts showed regular, responsible management for decades. Small, consistent withdrawals for living expenses, conservative investments. Then, 2 years ago, everything changed. Large transfers started happening, unusual expenditures. The pattern is consistent with the financial exploitation of an incapacitated person. I felt sick. My parents have power of attorney. They've been managing her care. Power of attorney doesn't give someone the right to steal, Whitmore said quietly. And that's what this looks like. We've seen it before. Family members get access to an elderly relative's money, start using it for themselves, justify it by saying they deserve it for providing care, or that the person won't live long enough to need it, or that it will eventually be theirs anyway. He let that sink in. Then, he said something that changed everything. Except, we can't prove anything was taken without your grandmother's consent, because she signed documents 2 years ago, when she was already showing signs of cognitive decline, giving your parents broad authority to manage her assets, however they deemed appropriate. So, there's nothing anyone can do? I didn't say that. Whitmore leaned forward. Miss Chen, I'm going to tell you something that I could get fired for sharing, but I've been working in banking for 30 years, and I've seen too many elderly people victimised by their own families. Your case is different because of one critical detail. He paused, making sure I was paying attention. You're still on these accounts. You signed those transfer forms, and that means, legally, you have standing to file a complaint about fraud if you believe something improper occurred. My mind was racing. But I authorised the transfers. I signed the forms. Under false pretenses, if your parents misrepresented what the money would be used for, if they told you it was for your grandmother's care, but they actually used it for themselves, that's fraud. And because you're a party to the accounts, you can contest it. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? Because I suspect your parents have been planning this for a long time, and I suspect they made sure you signed those forms specifically, so that if anyone ever questioned them, they could claim you were a willing participant. You're their insurance policy. He met my eyes. The question is, are you willing to do what needs to be done to protect your grandmother, even if it means going against your own parents? I thought about Grandma, about the afternoons we spent together when I was a kid, her patient hands guiding mine across piano keys, about the way she smiled when I learned a new Mandarin phrase correctly, about the sacrifices she made so that our family could have a better life. Tell me what I need to do. Whitmore nodded slowly. He pulled out a form and slid it across the desk. First, we file this suspicious activity report. It goes to FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. They'll investigate the transactions. Then you file a police report claiming you were deceived about the purpose of the transfers. That opens a criminal investigation. And what happens to my parents? That depends on what the investigation finds. If they can prove fraud, your parents could face criminal charges. The money could be recovered and returned to your grandmother's account. My hands were shaking. They'll never forgive me. Miss Chen, forgiveness is between you and them. Justice is between them and the law. What they did to your grandmother wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. This was planned, calculated. They used you to make it happen because they knew you trust them. I thought about that for a long time. Then I picked up the pen. Where do I sign? The suspicious activity report went to federal authorities that afternoon. I filed a police report the next morning. Yes, sitting in a small room at the Seattle Police Department with a detective named Maria Santos, who specialized in elder abuse cases. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd heard every excuse and wasn't impressed by any of them. Walk me through exactly what your parents told you, she said, recorder running. Pen poised over her notebook. I explained everything. The urgent family meeting, the story about increasing care costs, the reassurance that it was just a formality, the trust I'd placed in them because they were family. Santos wrote it all down. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. When's the last time you actually visited your grandmother? I felt my face flush with shame. 6 months ago, maybe longer. And how did she seem? Confused sometimes, but alert. She knew who I was. She asked about my work. I paused. My parents said she was having more bad days lately, that the stroke had affected her more than we realized. Did you verify that with her doctors? No, I trusted my parents. Santos set down her pen and looked at me directly. Miss Chen, I'm going to be honest with you. Cases like this are difficult to prosecute because the victims can't always testify reliably, and family members often claim they had permission to use the money. The fact that your parents got you to sign those transfer forms makes this more complicated. But I was lied to about what the money would be used for. I believe you. The question is whether we can prove it. Can you think of anything? Emails, text messages, say, recorded conversations, where your parents explicitly stated the money was for your grandmother's care? I thought hard. Then I remembered something. My mother sent me a text the night before I signed the forms. She was reminding me about the meeting. Let me find it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. There it was, dated 3 weeks and 1 day ago. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Don't forget, we need your help making sure Grandma's care is fully funded. The facility costs are getting so high, but we want her to have the best. I showed it to Santos. She photographed the screen. This helps. It establishes that they told you the money was for care costs. Now, we need to prove they used it for something else. She closed her notebook. Miss Chen, I'm going to need you to do something difficult. I need you to act normal with your parents. Don't let them know you filed a report. Don't confront them. Just continue as you have been while we investigate. How long will that take? Depends on what we find. Could be weeks, could be months. She paused. Can you handle that? Pretending everything is fine while we build a case against your own family? I thought about Grandma sitting in that assisted living facility, unaware that the money she'd spent 40 years saving was gone. unaware that her own son had stolen it, unaware that I'd helped him do it. Yes, I said, I can handle it. But I was wrong about that, because what I didn't know yet was that my parents were much smarter than I'd given them credit for, and they'd been preparing for exactly this scenario. The call came 3 days after I filed the police report. My mother's voice on the phone was warm, cheerful, utterly convincing. Amelia, sweetheart, we're having a family dinner tonight. Your father's making his special dumplings. Can you come? Every instinct I had screamed to say no, but Detective Santos had been clear. Act normal. Don't let them suspect anything. Sure, Mum. What time? 6 o'clock. And Amelia? Wear something nice. We have a surprise for you. I drove to their house that evening with my stomach in knots. The dread I felt wasn't just about facing them. It was about the performance I'd have to give. Pretending I didn't know what they'd done. Pretending I hadn't just filed a criminal complaint against my own parents. My father answered the door with a huge smile. Amelia, come in, come in. We're so glad you could make it. The house smelled like ginger and soy sauce. My mother was in the kitchen, wrapping dumplings with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. She wiped her hands on her apron and hugged me. You look tired, sweetheart. Are they working you too hard at that company? Just the usual deadlines, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. We made small talk while dinner cooked. My parents asked about work, about my apartment, about whether I was dating anyone. Normal family conversation. The kind of easy chat we'd had hundreds of times before. Except nothing was normal anymore. Over dinner, my father cleared his throat. Amelia, we wanted to talk to you about something important. It's about Grandma. My heart started pounding. Is she okay? She's fine, my mother said quickly. Better than fine, actually. We've been working with her doctors, and they're very pleased with her progress. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. We wanted to thank you for helping us with those transfers. It made everything so much easier, and we wanted you to have this. He slid the envelope across the table. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a check, made out to me, for $50,000. I stared at it, unable to process what I was seeing. $50,000, written in my mother's careful handwriting. What is this? My mother's smile was gentle, loving. It's your inheritance, sweetheart. Early, obviously, but your father and I were talking, and we realised Grandma would want you to have something now while you can enjoy it. You work so hard. You deserve to buy a nicer place or take a vacation, or just have some security. The cheque felt like it was burning my fingers. This was it. This was the trap. If I accepted this money, I became complicit. I couldn't claim I was deceived if I took a $50,000 cut. This was my parents' insurance policy, their way of making sure that if I ever questioned them, I'd be just as guilty as they were. I can't accept this, I said, my voice shaking. My father's expression hardened just slightly. Why not? It's Grandma's money. It should be used for her care. We are using it for her care, my mother said, her tone still sweet but with an edge underneath. We've set aside more than enough for everything she'll ever need. This is extra. Money she wants you to have. Did she tell you that? Silence. The kind of silence that answers the question without words. My father leaned forward. Amelia, let me be very clear about something. Your grandmother is 84 years old. She has maybe 5, maybe 10 years left if we're lucky. The money we're managing will cover her care completely. What's left over is the family inheritance. You, me, your mother. That's how these things work. And you just decided to give me my share early? We decided to give you an advance, my mother corrected, because we love you, because we want you to have opportunities now. She paused. Unless there's a reason you don't want to accept it. There it was, the test. Accept the money and become an accomplice, or refuse it and reveal that I suspected something. I thought about Detective Santos. Act normal. Don't let them suspect anything. I picked up the check and folded it carefully. Thank you. This is really generous. The tension in the room evaporated. My parents visibly relaxed. Of course, sweetheart, my mother said. We're family. We take care of each other. I deposited the check the next morning, not because I wanted to keep it, because Detective Santos needed documentation of the bribe, because every transaction my parents made was evidence, because the trap they'd set for me was now a trap for them. The investigation moved slowly. Detective Santos worked with federal agents from FinCEN. They subpoenaed records from the assisted living facility. They interviewed the staff who cared for my grandmother. They traced every dollar my parents had withdrawn. What they found was worse than I'd imagined. Over 2 years, my parents had stolen approximately $640,000 from my grandmother. They'd used it for everything. A down payment on a vacation home in Palm Springs, my father's new Tesla, my mother's jewelry collection, country club memberships, luxury cruises, 2 years of living well beyond their actual means, all funded by an elderly woman who trusted them to take care of her. The assisted living facility confirmed that my grandmother's care costs were $4,200 per month. Everything she needed cost about $50,000 per year. My parents had taken nearly 13 times that amount. And the worst part, my grandmother's actual care was suffering. The staff reported that her bills were often paid late, that my parents had requested cheaper meal plans to save money, that they'd declined optional physical therapy that could have helped her recovery because it was too expensive. They were stealing from her while simultaneously cutting costs on her care. Detective Santos called me 6 weeks after I filed the report. Her voice was grim. "We have enough for charges. Fraud, elder abuse, theft. Your parents are going to be arrested." I sat down hard on my couch. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, coordinated with federal agents. We wanted to give you advance warning." "Why?" "Because they're going to know you were involved in the investigation. Once they're arrested, once they see the evidence, they'll figure out you reported them. We can offer you protection if you think they might retaliate." I thought about my parents, about the people who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who I'd trusted my entire life. "I don't think they'll hurt me," I said, "but I don't know them anymore, so maybe I'm wrong about that too." The arrests happened at 7 in the morning. Federal agents and local police executed search warrants simultaneously. My parents were handcuffed in their home, read their rights, taken into custody. I didn't watch. I couldn't. But Detective Santos sent me a message when it was done. "Arrests complete, evidence secured. Your grandmother is safe now." My phone started ringing an hour later. My father's lawyer, then my mother's sister, then family friends. Everyone wanting to know what happened, how this could be real, whether it was all some terrible mistake. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove to the assisted living facility where my grandmother lived. I hadn't visited in over 6 months. Shame had kept me away. And then the investigation. And then the fear of facing her knowing what I'd helped my parents do. But she deserved better than my cowardice. The nurse at the front desk recognized me from previous visits. She smiled. But there was something guarded in her expression now. "Your grandmother is in the common room. She's been asking about you." I found her by the window, staring out at the garden. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. But when she turned and saw me, her face lit up with a smile that broke my heart. "Amelia, my sweet girl, you came to visit." I sat down next to her and took her hand. It was so thin, so delicate. The hand that had guided mine across piano keys, that had folded thousands of dumplings, that had worked for 40 years to build the security these people had stolen. "Hi, Grandma, I'm so sorry I haven't visited more." "You're busy, I understand. You work hard." She paused, her eyes searching my face. "Something's wrong. I can see it." I didn't know how to tell her. How do you explain to someone that their own son betrayed them? That the family they trusted destroyed them? That you helped to make it happen? "Grandma, I need to ask you something. It's important." "Ask anything, sweetheart." "Did you tell Dad and Mum that they could use your money? That they could take it for themselves instead of using it for your care?" Her face clouded with confusion. "My money. I gave them power of attorney to pay my bills here, to manage things, but I didn't tell them to take anything. Do you know how much money you had saved?" She thought for a moment. "A lot. Maybe $900,000. I saved for so many years. I wanted to make sure I could pay for my care. And then, whatever was left, that would go to family." She looked at me with sudden clarity. "Why? Is something wrong with my money?" I squeezed her hand. "And it's going to be okay now, Grandma. I'm going to make sure it's okay. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, please take just 1 second to hit that like button. Your support means everything to me, and I promise the best part is coming. Now, let's finish this." The criminal case moved through the system over the following months. My parents hired expensive lawyers, tried every defense they could think of. They claimed they had verbal permission from my grandmother. They claimed the money was compensation for providing her care. They claimed I was a disgruntled daughter making false accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing exact withdrawal amounts and dates. Receipts for personal purchases, the vacation home title, the Tesla registration. Credit card statements showing luxury spending, while my grandmother's care bills were paid late, and my testimony. The text message from my mother explicitly stating the money was for Grandma's care. The $50,000 check they'd tried to use as a bribe. Every word they'd said to convince me to sign those forms. The federal prosecutor was a woman named Jennifer Wright. She'd been handling elder financial abuse cases for 15 years. She'd seen everything. Your parents made several critical mistakes, she told me during one of our preparation meetings. First, they underestimated how much documentation banks maintain. Second, they assumed your grandmother wouldn't be considered a reliable witness. Third, they thought bringing you in as an accomplice would protect them. But I did help them. Under false pretenses. You're a victim here too, Miss Chen. They manipulated you, used your trust to commit fraud. She paused. Though I have to say, you did something unusual. Most people in your position choose family loyalty over doing the right thing. They stay silent, or they actively help cover it up. You didn't. I kept thinking about what my grandmother would want, and she wouldn't want this. She worked too hard for her money to see it stolen. That's exactly what we'll tell the jury. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the courtroom every single day watching my parents try to convince 12 strangers that they'd done nothing wrong. That taking $640,000 from an elderly woman's care account for personal luxury was somehow justified. My mother cried on the stand. My father appeared earnest, apologetic, a victim of circumstances and misunderstanding. But numbers don't lie. And when the prosecution showed the jury exactly where every dollar went, when they compared the luxury purchases to the late care payments, when they showed my grandmother's medical records, confirming she was capable of making clear decisions about her own finances, there was no ambiguity left. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty, both counts of fraud, both counts of elder financial abuse, both counts of theft. The judge looked at my parents with undisguised disgust. You stole from your own mother while simultaneously cutting costs on her medical care. You used your daughter to commit fraud. You showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and no concern for the harm you caused. My father got 7 years in federal prison. My mother got 5. Full restitution ordered. Every asset they purchased with stolen money would be liquidated and returned to Grandma's account. I sat in that courtroom and felt nothing. Not triumph, not sadness, just a hollow ache where my family used to be. After the sentencing, I visited my grandmother again, this time with better news. They found your money, Grandma, almost all of it. It's going back into your account. Your care is fully funded. You don't have to worry about anything. She looked at me with those wise old eyes. And my son? What happens to him? He's going to prison, Grandma. I'm so sorry. She was quiet for a long time. And then she squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, Amelia. I know that wasn't easy. I know it hurt you to go against your parents. She paused. But some things are more important than family peace. Doing what's right is even when it costs you everything. That's real courage. I feel like I destroyed our family. No, sweetheart. Your parents did that when they chose money over integrity. You just made sure they faced consequences. There's a difference. The restitution process took 6 months. The vacation home was sold. The Tesla was seized and auctioned. My mother's jewelry collection was liquidated. Every asset purchased with stolen money was converted back to cash and deposited into my grandmother's account. Final amount recovered. $687,000. Not everything. Some of the money had been spent on experiences that couldn't be recovered, cruises and dinners and country club fees, but most of it came back. As for the $50,000 check my parents had given me, I'd never spent a dollar of it. The money sat in a separate account, evidence for the trial. Once the case was over, I transferred every penny back to Grandma's account. She tried to refuse. That was meant for you, sweetheart, for your future. I don't want money that came from hurting you, Grandma. I want to earn my own way, like you did. She smiled at that. You're more like me than I realised. My parents write me letters sometimes. Long, bitter letters full of blame and accusations and demands for forgiveness. They say I betrayed the family, They say I ruined their lives. They say everything that happened was my fault. I don't respond. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. But I visit my grandmother every Sunday now. We have tea, the expensive oolong she loves, and she tells me stories about her life, about working as a seamstress, about raising a family in a new country, about the sacrifices she made so we could have opportunities. Last week, she told me something that stuck with me. Money reveals who people really are, she said. When your parents saw all that money, they saw what they could take. When you saw what they'd done, you saw someone who needed protection. That tells me everything about who you are, Amelia. I just did what was right. No, sweetheart. You did what was hard. Most people choose the easy path. They choose family loyalty over justice, comfort over conscience. You chose differently. She squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. I still work at the same tech startup, still live in the same studio apartment, still make $92,000 a year. My life looks almost exactly the same as it did before any of this happened. But I'm different. I learned that trust has to be verified. That family doesn't give you permission to hurt people, that doing the right thing sometimes means standing completely alone. And I learned that my grandmother, who worked 40 years saving every penny she could, who sacrificed everything for her family, deserved someone willing to fight for her when she couldn't fight for herself. The bank manager who started all of this, Theodore Whitmore, called me a few months after the trial. He'd followed the case in the news. I wanted you to know something, he said. In 30 years of banking, I've seen hundreds of cases like your grandmother's. Most of them end with the family getting away with it because nobody speaks up. The victims are too scared, too confused, or too isolated to get help. And the people who could help choose to look the other way? Why are you telling me this? Because you didn't look away. You could have kept that $50,000 and convinced yourself your parents had permission to use the rest. You could have decided it wasn't worth destroying your family over. Most people make that choice. He paused. Thank you for being someone who didn't. I think about that conversation sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, about all the elderly people out there right now being robbed by their own families, about all the people who see it happening and choose silence. My grandmother is 85 now. She's doing well. The physical therapy my parents had refused to pay for has helped her recovery. She's sharper, stronger, more engaged. She plays mahjong with other residents and beats them regularly. She gardens in the facility's raised beds. She lives a full life funded by the money she spent 40 years saving. And every Sunday, when I visit, she hugs me tight and says the same thing. Thank you for seeing me, Amelia. Thank you for remembering I was a person worth protecting. That's worth more than any inheritance I could ever receive. Some people build their whole lives on lies. But here's what I learned. The truth doesn't care about your timeline. It doesn't care about family loyalty or social pressure or how much easier it would be to stay silent. The truth just waits. Patient, inevitable. Ready for the moment when someone decides to speak it out loud. I'm glad I was that someone, even though it cost me everything I thought was my family, because real family doesn't steal from the elderly. Real family doesn't manipulate trust. Real family doesn't make you choose between conscience and loyalty. Real family would never put you in that position in the first place. And my grandmother, she taught me what real family actually looks like. Someone who sacrifices for others. Someone who builds rather than takes. Someone whose love doesn't come with conditions or price tags. I have one real family member left. That's enough. That's more than enough.